All right, today I'm going to show you how to make a table and a graph using Excel spreadsheet. What you'll want to make sure you have downloaded is Excel. It's that green little box down here with a little X on it. I'm going to open it up. And I'm going to just do a blank workbook here. It'll look like this when you start off with. And if you don't have this downloaded on your iPad, just go to your Mozel Manager and you can download a copy of that app. And first, just like you do if you're going to draw it by hand, you always have to make your data table first before you can make your graph. So we're going to start by making our data table. So I'm just going to do the practice one that's at the top of our Excel graphing practice sheet that I sent out to you and gave to you. And that's having to do with candy bars. You know, I'm asking my students what their favorite candy is. And so 10 students selected Reese's, 5 students selected Starburst, 4 students selected Skittles, 7 students selected Twix, and 3 students selected Snickers. All right, so what is it that I'm changing in that little scenario there? I'm changing the type of candy that I offer, correct? So whatever it is that you're manipulating or changing in an experiment is your independent variable. And if you remember from our notes from the graph tables and graph notes, your independent variable always goes in this first column. So in that first little cell there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click in it so I can get my keyboard to come up. I'm just going to do type of candy. So you can do this with me. Oops, so you can kind of practice. Now notice that it kind of went over into my next cell. If you want to make your columns wider, you just double click up in the A, B, or C, whatever column you want to widen, and when it turns green and you get that double bar, you just have to drag your finger over and you can make that as big as you want, okay? So I'm just going to make that big enough there. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go in and type in my different types of candy. Let's see, Reese's. I kind of picked a lot of my favorite ones. I'll have to be honest with you there. Starburst. I usually don't eat candy. I like stuff with chocolate in it, especially if it's dark chocolate. Skittles. Twix. And Snickers. There, I've got all of my different types of candy listed. So I'm going to go up to the next column. Remember, the next column would be your dependent variable. That's what you're going to be measuring in this experiment. So it looks like we basically just counted number of students, right? So I'm going to type that in up in the top there. Oops. I should know how to learn how to spell first though, right? There, number of students. Now you can go ahead and fill in your amounts. 10 selected Reese's. 5, got the Starburst. 4 with Skittles. 7 with Twix. And 3 with Snickers. And there, we're all done. We've got our data table. Now what I like to do with the data table, just so it looks a little neat, nice and neat, I'm going to click up in that upper corner, and whenever you get the little green dots around one of them, you can actually take your finger in that corner dot and drag it. I'm just going to highlight all of my table here. And because I'm going to eventually copy and paste this into my Word document that you're going to upload from OneDrive to Schoology, I go up here to the top where it looks like that little window pane, and that's what's called your borders. And I always pick all borders, and then if you look there, you can see I have a nice, neat data table with lines all around the outside, and it's kind of separating everything so it looks good. Now, while this is still highlighting, here's the fun part. I can use this to automatically make my data, my graph. And so I'm going to go up here to where it says Insert. You click on that. And over to the right where it says Chart, you click on Chart. And it shows you all sorts of different ones there. Now, this table right here is just showing you different types of candies, so different categories, and then the amounts. So the most appropriate one for this one would be what we call a column chart. It looks like a bar graph, but in Excel, bar graphs come out from the side, so we have to pick this column one. And usually the very first one in the upper left-hand corner is the best choice for making that. And you can see it already generated part of my graph for me. Now, I'm going to move this a little bit so I can see a little bit better. We have to make sure we have everything labeled though, right? We have to make sure we have a good title, that we've labeled our X and Y axes. And if you look at the bottom, where it shows the different types of candy, all of a sudden it has this thing down there that says number of students. Well, that doesn't sound right. That's actually a legend, and it automatically defaults to putting a legend in there for you. So that's probably one of the first things you want to do is get rid of that. And to make any changes on your graph here, first of all, you have to have it selected, so you have the little black dots around on the outside. You go up here to the top again where it says elements, and you click on elements, and it gives you all sorts of different choices of things that you can kind of manipulate on your graph. I'm going to go down here to where it says legend, and notice they already have it defaulted to putting one at the bottom. That's why that number of students automatically popped up. So I'm going to go up here to the top and click none. And see, it just took that right off of there for me. So I got that taken care of. But I do want to label both my X and Y axis. So I'm going to go back up to elements. I'm going to go to axes titles. I want to click primary horizontal for the Y axis. I mean for the X axis. And I'm going to go back again to axis titles, and I want to click vertical for the Y axis. And now you can see the words axis title. Well, that's not really your title, is it? You have to actually label it. So don't forget, the independent variable goes on the X axis, and your independent variable, if you go back up to your table, you already have it labeled there. It was type of candy. So I'm just going to double click in there so I can write again. I'm going to click to the, slide to the end so I can back up here, and I'm going to just do type of candy. And I've got that taken care of. I can do the same over here, double click. Yep. If it's going to let me do it here. Come on. Just take that away from there, and then we said that was number of students. So I'm going to click that in there. So you've already got a lot of your answers already once you made your table as far as what you need to label. Remember, dry mix, your dependent variable goes on the y-axis, your independent variable goes on your x-axis. Now, is this an appropriate title up here? Number of students? That's only your dependent variable. And remember, your title needs to have both the independent and dependent variables. And so we're going to click up there as well and make that a little bit more thorough. Number of students, and I'm just going to say choosing different types of candy. Okay, so now I've got my title all taken care of up there. It includes both my independent and my dependent variable. I've labeled my axes. Now this particular graph didn't have any units associated with it, but if there would have been units, if I would have been measuring something in millimeters or seconds or something like that, you always put that in parentheses behind your labels here. Now one thing I want to make you have to be very careful of, and that's up here when we're doing our filling in our data table. Notice how I just put numbers in under number of students. Let's say I was measuring height of a plant in millimeters. You would always put your millimeters up here in the label, like behind where it says number of students, I would have said height of plant, and in parentheses put millimeters. Don't ever put MMs in the column here underneath the dependent variable numbers, because it won't make the graph for you if you have words in here, okay? You can do that for the independent variable, okay? So if you were saying day 1, day 2, day 3, you could still have those letters with a number associated in your first column with your independent variable. But for the dependent variable, you can only have numbers, no words. If your graph doesn't work well, it's because that's what you did, okay? So just be sure of that. And that's how you make a graph. And you're gonna have to make both a line graph and a bar graph, or column graph, I should say. Ooh, one last thing. Your table here is going to need a title before you copy it onto your Word document. So what I'm going to do is, where in the row there, click on the number 1 so I get the whole row there. And notice how you have this black bar that comes up. I'm just going to hit insert. It's going to put an extra row for me. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on that first cell. I'm just going to slide over and highlight both of those first 2 cells. And if you go up to the right of the letter A up here where there's some lines and 3 dots, I'm going to click on that, and that's for alignment. And if I go way to the bottom where it says merge and center, it merged those 2 cells up there, so I have a nice little spot to put my title, and I'm just going to write the same thing, number of students choosing different types of candy. Okay. And now I'm just going to slide this cell over just a little bit, see if I can fit all that in there. There. And there you've got a title for your table as well. Okay, so that's how you make tables and graphs in Excel.